Well, thank you all for attending, and I'm sure others will be joining. Um, Welcome to today's SCORE webinar, Smiling and Dialin for Dollars. It's not that simple. This webinar is being presented by Jack Luke, and Jack started with SCORE as a workshop presenter in 2018. And since 2020 has supported the chapter clients as a subject matter expert for nonprofits. With close to 25 years as a nonprofit executive and consultant for small and mid-sized nonprofits, he also has business and entrepreneurial experience in consultative sales, financial services, manufacturing operations, and business communications for over 30 years in Philadelphia. He has served on the board of several nonprofits, including his current position on the Human Services NPO Advisory Board. He has a post-baccalaureate certificate in nonprofit management from LaSalle University School of Business and is an alumnus of St. Joseph's University Haub School of Business. I'd like to thank Jack for giving us the time to present this topic, which you all should find very informative. But before we turn it over to Jack, I do want to just give a few bits of details about SCORE. And my name is Mercedes Diaz, and I'm a member of SCORE. I'm also a mentor, and I'm part of the SCORE of Chester and Delaware counties. SCORE is a nonprofit organization that's been in existence for over 50 years. It's a national organization with over 10,000 volunteers, serving clients throughout the U.S. We have approximately 100 volunteers here in Chester and Delaware counties. And we're all here to either serve as mentors, subject matter experts, or like Jack, as also a presenter. And SCORE's mission is to foster a strong small business community by providing mentoring and education to entrepreneurs and small business owners. We are here to support you and help you grow your business. And SCORE is also a resource partner of the Small Business Administration. A couple of logistical things. So we are recording this, this presentation, and it will be made available to you in a follow-up email from SCORE after today's session. You all have been placed on mute to avoid any distractions. Jack will be taking questions and will answer your questions, but we do ask that you write your questions down in the Q&A box, and at the end of the presentation, Jack will be addressing the questions. All right. If there's any information that you want to share with all the attendees and participants, you can put that into the chat box. All right. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jack and have him get started.
Thank you very much, Mercedes. Thank you to everyone who has joined the call today. On behalf of SCORE, we appreciate the fact that you have an interest in this subject, which is basically funding as related to nonprofits. I came up with the title, Smilin and Dialin for Dollars, because it's something that back a few decades ago, it used to be kind of a common phrase. And back then, it pretty much was pretty simple and it worked to a great extent. But the world has changed, and today there's many more channels. It's a multi-channeled enterprise, if you will, at this point. So today, missions are dependent upon a full funding, also known as a program budget. And although reaching out today using the phone is still important, there's a lot more to fundraising. Think about such things as your email inbox, e-newsletters, text messages, traditional snail mail letters and postcards, the annual appeal mail packets that you probably receive, usually around the holiday season period, as well as event fundraiser invitations, et cetera, et cetera. Success in fundraising is not a haphazard activity. It is something that requires an intentionality. The good fundraising plans that are out there, they address all the parts, and there are multiple parts, in attracting and retaining donors over time. I'm going to say that again, because it's really important in terms of what the core of fundraising planning or any type of business revenue planning is, and that is attracting and retaining donors over time. You will also see many similarities between the business world and the nonprofit world. In the business world, it's about attracting and retaining customers or clients over hopefully long periods of time. In the nonprofit side, it's attracting and retaining donors, also known as grantors, over periods of time. A grantor, by the way, usually refers to some formalized process when you're basically approaching a foundation or some enterprise that requires a lot of documentation before deciding to say yes to usually a fairly sizable, what they call grant, or what in the donor world is called a gift. The lion's share of the mix, of this mix in the marketing mix of fundraising plans, is effective communication to what I call various market segments. Once again, we're using a term market segments, which is something that applies to the for-profit world, but we also have that here in the nonprofit world as well. The fundraising plan starts with the budget. This upcoming fiscal year, quote unquote, we have to ask ourselves, what's our program cost going to be, and what is and also our overhead. And the gap between this number and the fiscal year end account balance, that will be the fundraising goal. And although one person is responsible for authoring the fundraising plan, it's really collaborative, and it requires the members of the board of directors or board of trustees to buy in. Sometimes, although not required by most nonprofit bylaws, the fundraising plan is presented as well on the board, one of the board agendas for an approval vote. And that's also a very good way to get a broad buy-in by all members of the board. Sounds like a plan. It is a plan. Unfortunately, there's a very high percentage of nonprofit organizations that have not engaged in putting a plan together. This is not easy to begin with, and not having a plan makes it so much more difficult because it becomes a very haphazard enterprise that you cannot track and measure. So that's the reason, that's the fundamental reason for the plan. So the question is, do you happen to have an annual fundraising plan?
So I've launched a poll. Hopefully all of you can see it. If you would please just respond to provide one of the responses. We have 16 participants on right now, Jack.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. And if folks could. There should be a poll. Folks should be able to see a poll on their screen. If you can answer that poll, I only see 8 participants that have answered the poll. 9. But maybe if you can't see the poll, maybe you could just put your answer in the chat. All right. So it looks like so far, 7 out of the 10 people that have responded, 8 out of the 11 people that have responded do not have a plan. 3 are in the process of developing a plan, and there aren't any that are on the call today that have a plan.
Okay, well, the good news is as we get to the latter part of the presentation, we will have some additional resources for those who are in the process of developing a plan, as well as those who have not yet begun to start the plan. So hopefully the information that we're passing along to you by way of the webinar is good, but I'm going to give you some additional resources, some links, etc., that you can click into, and you'll basically be able to draw upon more information so that you'll be put in a position where you can actually make some good progress toward getting a plan in effect.
Do you want me to launch the second poll?
Yes, please.
Yes, I will go ahead.
Mhm.
The second question is about how you're addressing your funding gap. Again, it's a poll that you should see on your screen. If you don't see it, you can put it into the chat. We're getting some responses.
Mhm.
And somebody, Karen, is saying that they don't currently have a funding gap at the time. So that's good for you.
Yeah.
That's very lucky for you.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going to go ahead and end the poll so you can see the results. So we have 6 out of 9 say they have no specific plan for how to close the gap.
mhm.
And 3 of them have an informal plan for closing the gap.
Okay, well, that's obviously, there's recognition there that something needs to be done, so that the budget can be met, because all programs that are run, all operational costs that are associated uh, with the nonprofit, that gap must be filled in order for it to continue to operate and sustain itself. So once again, that brings us back to what will be in our next slide. The things that we need to be doing in terms of developing our marketing plan, also known as a fundraising plan, also known as a development plan. There are 5 fundamental parts to coming up with this plan. In the business world, a lot of this is looking more like the annual business plan or the annual business marketing plan. On the nonprofit side, it's known as the fundraising plan or the development plan. So we need to have budget projections for, what are we going to be spending in order to get our programs run so that our mission recipients can be, fully benefiting from what we do. Another part of the plan are coming up with strategies. Strategies are basically, where is it that we need to go? And then another part of that is the tactical side. The tactical side is, well, once we decide where we need to be going during the course of the next year, how do we get there? Specifically, how do we get there? What kind of action plans do we need to put together? And then the next part of the plan is what would be called the marketing mix, which we'll talk about in a little bit later in another slide, which are all the parts of basically the entire outreach, so that you're involved in doing various activities for a purpose, where the purpose is, if not to have someone come forward with a gift or to increase their gift, or to retain them as a donor or a grantor, that you're doing awareness outreach so that you're building your base of support. And then the last part of the plan obviously translates to revenue. If we're coming up with the strategies and the tactics, and we have a gap to fill vis-a-vis our budget projections over the course of the next year, what kind of revenue, what is the exact amount of revenue that we need to have brought through the door during the course of the upcoming year? So finally, on this slide, and once again, it's somewhat of a reiteration, what nonprofits do in their planning is really extremely similar to the business sector. There must be, prior to, and this is a very important point, there must be, prior to any fundraising, before you even begin to speak about the specifics of a plan, there needs to be a clearly understood and articulated mission statement. So I sure hope that everybody has their mission statement, and also all their board members can recite the mission statement, because that sometimes becomes another problem. And also there needs to be a statement right attached to that mission statement or woven into it. There needs to be a statement of what the positive impacts are of the work that you are doing in your community. The people or grantors, if they're on the foundation side, who must hear this, they are known as, once again, another business terminology, they are your market segments. That is your various lists that you should be building. The message or the method of approach is very likely different for different market segments or different lists. And that's an important point as well. You can't basically address and approach everyone exactly the same. For example, if you're going out to a business leader who controls a business in the community and is the kind of person who has a history that when they decide to support a nonprofit organization, usually it's going to be a 5-figure check that they're going to put under consideration. That's a lot different than speaking to a new donor who is someone that's going to be maybe a former volunteer whose average annual gift might be $75 a year, and they might come to one special event for $25 a year as well. So you're looking at approaching them and the return on investment in terms of the time of your board and staff, then that really needs to be different than the communication you're doing to that other segment, which is that business leader in the community who controls a well-known company, let's say, and the way you approach them and the message that you deliver and how you deliver it really needs to be different than it does for someone else, basically. And earlier we talked about the market segments, and specifically, what are they? Board members is a segment. Your benefactors, who are your current benefactors, as well as somebody that you've been cultivating for the last couple of years, that you think this might be the year that we can ask them for a significant gift. Centers of influence, like CPAs and attorneys who are in town. That's another market segment. Community leaders, grantors, such as someone who's a program manager of a large charitable trust that's in your geographic area. Family foundation leaders, business sponsors, volunteers, and as well as your database, people that you've been keeping track of over the course of the last couple to 3 years or more. And these are your current donors, or they are prospective donors. So this represents the typical market segmentation of donors and grantors. And what do they need to know? They need to know what I termed earlier the case for support. And what is that? What it really is, it's a separate document, which can either be a hard copy or in digital form, such as a web page. And it's the basis of this is the basis of the fundraising plan. And in this case for support that you put together, you really need to be addressing these kind of questions. Why does the nonprofit organization need funding now? Why do you need funding now? And why should the financial support go to your nonprofit organization versus others that are out there? So effectively what it is, it's a way for you to state your reason for being. It is also a way for you to state in the case for support, the kind of impact that you've been able to measure and tell people that you're making. And it also is a statement of what is known as differentiation in the marketing world. There are others that are out there. There are others that are doing similar things or even different things in terms of mission. But what you're doing is relevant to the person that you are approaching. It might be on a geographic basis. It might be on the type of people, for example, if you're in human services that you may be helping, or it might be the kind of museum that you're looking to get, a curated exhibit into, and that person, is someone who would align with that. So all those kind of things go in the case for support, and the case for support is something that is shareable. Everyone in the organization should know about and be very familiar with the case for support, and frankly, be able to articulate that. It also will be the jump off point for many other communications that the nonprofit is going to be doing in the fundraising side of things, as well as the communication side of things. Sometimes you're out looking to ask for a gift. Other times you're actually out there trying to create awareness for your nonprofit organization. And eventually over the next couple of years, the point will become, if you get somebody engaged, the awareness can convert to actually someone being a donor. And that's at that point, you change from going to communication about trying to engage someone and cultivate someone. You switch it to the point of, please seriously consider, joining with us and going shoulder to shoulder through a donation to our nonprofit mission. I put this one up here mainly because I just want everybody to be aware that in any kind of communication that you're doing, including it being incorporated in your fundraising plan, that the more communication that is done, the better, and the more communication that is done graphically is even more powerful. Many people today are visual learners. Many people today, from the standpoint of handling disparate information and trying to process all that and come to some kind of conclusion, it's a lot more difficult if that's always all text driven. So this is, I thought, was a fantastic example by this inner city hospital showing the expenses that they will have incurred in this year, was the year 2021. And on one side, graphically showing that and where the expenses did occur. And on the other side, showing where did the funding come from in order for us to meet the expenses that we incurred. So the case for support, an annual report, marketing communications, they're all enhanced with greater clarity when using graphical communication. In this slide, I'd like to emphasize the word, which is italicized, strategic. Strategic fundraising is fundamental. And strategic is going to be about the what or the where in goal setting. Let me explain that by getting more specific and giving you some examples. Number one, you can set a strategic goal or an objective by identifying and getting pledges from 3 new major donors. And major donors you might categorize as anybody who makes an annual gift of $5,000 or more. But you're going to set a strategic goal that we're going to identify and get pledges from 3 new major donors. That is a strategic objective. We also might want to include in there where another strategic objective that relates to that is that these new donors that we get over the course of the next year, that they will collectively come through as donors that exceed $25,000 over the course of the year. Another strategic objective, is increasing monthly giving donors by 30%. Right now, you might have a lot of donors, maybe 98% of your database. They make a gift once a year. They're a one-time lump sum donor. If you can convert, let's say you have 100 of those donors, and right now you're at 2 that are doing monthly giving. Well, if you can get that 2 to become 32, that is going to be your strategic objective. Now, how do you go about doing that? That's going to be another slide, which is going to be talking about the tactical side of setting a strategic goal. Another example would be, a strategic objective would be, let's add 2 more corporations as program underwriters or program sponsors during the course of this upcoming year. Another example, and the last example I'll give you here, is let's strategically set an objective of increasing our first-time donors by 25% in headcount and also 25% in dollars over the course of the next year. There are some examples of strategic fundraising. Now, the next slide is about the tactical side. And that is, another phrase for tactical is how to. So we have these strategic objectives that we set in our fundraising plan, but now we have to come up with some action plans, as well as dates, needs to be done by a certain date. We want to get involved in tactical actions that are going to align with our strategic objectives. Some examples could be something like this. The board president and the vice president will individually outreach and respond for any dollar gifts above a certain amount this year. They will also, when they are doing the outreach, they will also be asking for referrals. Who else is like-minded that we may not be communicating with now, but we'd like to approach to put in our database to start receiving our newsletter and be invited to our annual gala, something like that. That is a tactical approach that is supporting a strategic objective that we put in the plan. I'll just pick out one more. In order to make it easier and to increase our overall donations by 20% during this upcoming year, which, let's say that was a strategic objective, let's add and let's announce to everybody in our database, as well as new people that we're chatting with, that we're going to have a new text to give new donation option this year. And if we add that to what we were doing before, that is going to be very helpful toward likely getting us to that plus 20% in individual donor pledges and gifts over the course of the next year. Next slide. In terms of the fundraising plan, the one of the great tools that are out there today that you can find online, and there might actually be a link in the last slide to this. You can use Excel type or actual Excel spreadsheets that are going to help you, in a sense, get organized in estimating where your sources of funds are going to come from during the course of the upcoming year. And then you can also use as columns, once you identify these certain sources of funds, you can also use columns to make a determination as to who has the responsibility for that in the end, and what dates or what range of dates are attached to each of these items. So spreadsheets are today's best method for the practical mechanics of putting together a fundraising plan. The point here coming up is that everything that we do, strategies and tactics meet calendar. I think that's one slide. There we go. Thank you. Strategies and tactics meet calendar. This is a really important slide, because once you come up with what is it that we need to do, where do we need to go, and how do we go about it, that really doesn't mean anything and cannot be project managed unless it gets to a calendar. And this is a calendar that has, one more column attached to it than other ones do, but it's a very important column. And they phrase it, or the terminology that they use is department. Really what that column is who is going to be ultimately responsible for what we're listing in Q1 in January and in February and in March. Who has the ultimate responsibility for when we're doing this, and basically carrying it out, seeing it through, and doing the project management of whatever has been detailed in the area of fundraising activity. So the reason I thought this was important was to emphasize the fact that everything needs to get to a calendar. So tactics, which once again are very specific actions, they have to meet up with your calendar, as well as meeting up with, well, who's responsible for this? Next slide. This is similar, but it's similar to the last slide, but it's a little bit more extensive in terms of laying out another chart of what are we doing tactically, who's responsible for it, how much net revenue do we plan to bring in, and what is the nomenclature titling of the activity that we're engaging in at that time. And you can run that through in a very simple fashion. And once again, you can even use for calendar. Here's someone who's using a calendar, which is a portrait version of a spreadsheet. And it does work. It has all the components that you need in order to track and have success in converting your strategic objectives to tactical actions that are going to move you forward to a better place, so that you do not have a negative funding gap at the end of the year, and that you will have a sustainable nonprofit organization. So this is just a more detailed fundraising plan calendar.
Again, we will take questions at the end, but if you have any questions along the way, you can post them into the Q&A box, and we will definitely address them at the end.
Okay, thank you, Mercedes. Fundraising is, once again, we talked about it, has to be intentional. We said that up front. And I think you're also picking up, it's not easy. You have to be very organized. You'd have to approach it strategically and tactically. And it involves project management, really. It involves overall fundamental sound management principles and also project management. And in order to track all this disparate information and have valuable information that you're going to need for doing some of the segmentation we talked about before, as well as generating reports so that you can track, where are we this year versus where were we at the same time last year? And also notes on people that have been contacted or have contacted you or came out to a coffee klatch, where there was a good conversation that occurred. You found out that there's a hot button area of interest that they have that's within the kind of things that your organization does, and it needs to be developed and explored. Well, that information will just go into the Ethernet unless it gets documented and recorded. And the best way of doing all of that activity is through a CRM. Customer Relationship Management is the, I guess, acronym. CRM is the abbreviation for that. Database. There are many of these databases that are out there. There are vendors that specialize in this area. I would not try to use Excel spreadsheets for database. That usually has been proven not to work very well. They're just not robust enough. But there are plenty of databases that are out there, and frankly, many of them can be grant funded, or if you talk to a good donor who's been involved with other nonprofits over the years and knows how important databases are, many times they'll make a gift, maybe not solely, but maybe in concert with somebody else, so that you can use those funds to enter into a contract database. Most everything is on the cloud today, so it's not that you need software, but you will need some form of training. Training oftentimes is Zoom type of training these days, and it's just not something to overlook. It's almost, I would say, it's a part of doing business in the nonprofit sector, and if you don't, you're just losing so many opportunities to do effective fundraising. So there are essential technology to carry out the fundraising plan, as well as doing effective communications, report generation, your segmentation. However, you have to be aware of something called GIGO. And I think many of you have already heard that term before. It's an abbreviation for garbage in, garbage out. So if you have a database and you have someone who is not being disciplined in terms of entering accurate information or putting stuff in the wrong fields, when you go to run a report, you're not going to get the report that you should be getting, and it's going to create a future headache. So it's the kind of thing that it's worthwhile, but there's a dedication to it that has to be part of the entire process. And anyone who's brought on, who's going to have database access or data entry capabilities, is going to also have to have that same dedication. This is a question from Mercedes. I think you can see here.
Yeah. If folks could put in the chat, if you have a CRM tool, what is it? What are you doing for this? And what are you trying to do to improve some of the efficiency? We thought we'd just see what folks are using and what they're dealing with. So in the chat, you don't have to put in the Q&A, but in the chat. So Nicole is saying build systems on the CRM. So high level build systems on the CRM is what she's using. What are other folks using? Tammy's saying that she's just at the beginning stages and starting up her nonprofit, so not even there yet.
Okay,
Well, I mean, you definitely should put that as part of your planning to start up, is what CRM system you will use for your donor tracking.
right. And what I would say is, in something like this, you can go to an organization such as the Pennsylvania Association of Nonprofit Organizations here in PA. You could speak to someone there about, nonprofit databases. They'll probably give you 4 companies that they aren't necessarily recommending, but those 4 companies belong to Pano, and all 4 of them can be contacted by email. And you can also Google a nonprofit CRM database. There'll be a whole page that'll come up. Many of them will, basically offer free demos, so that you can actually try it out. Most of them have a trial period that goes 60 days. So if you try it and it just seems not to be a good fit, you can suspend your subscription. So there's a lot of flexibility there, and there's a lot. And then the last thing, I just thought of this. Any other nonprofit executive director who's in your community or in your space that you're in, for you to send them an email, or to even go on to like a Facebook group and put out there who is found the most cost-effective and easiest to use CRM that generates good reports and has some other nice functions. Would you mind sharing? So many times you can pick up great recommendations that way.
Do you know of any, Jack, that are low cost or even free?
I don't know of any free ones. There is one. It's I think it's called Give Butter, GIVEBUTTER. That would be one I would initially look at, and also I would Google that to find out what comes up like right alongside of it. So I do know I'm on an advisory board of one human services nonprofit right now, and I do know that they are using that.
Okay.
Another one that I've heard is low cost and workable is Neon, NEON. So those 2 would be 2 that I would, do the Google search, or and then possibly even read the summary, as well as maybe even jump in on one of the demos that they offer.
Yeah. So Nicole has said that she recommends HubSpot or High Level.
Okay.
And Joe is using SurveyMonkey, which is interesting. I didn't know that actually had a database.
Right.
I thought it was just a survey tool, but
right.
Maybe
I don't know any database linkage to with SurveyMonkey, just like you. So I don't know. I'll have to, once tomorrow, I'll take a look and see if they somehow have gone into that space in some way.
Yeah. And Nicole makes a very good point that before you actually go on the demo of a CRM tool, you really should list out what are the features and functionalities that you're looking for. And maybe you can do some, go see some demos, and then you complete your list, and then, before you really evaluate the tools, you should understand what your features and functionalities are that you're looking for, and what are most important to you and your organization.
Yeah, that's a very, very wise comment.
Okay.
Yeah, agreed. So we're on to the next slide. And I think this is worth noting. This is basically having, what it's saying in different words is we got to get everybody on board here, right? The culture of philanthropy is in the fundraising plan itself. That should help generate that. The fundraising plan is something that should be talked about, not only among board members, but um, staff members, volunteers. Everybody should be aware, generally speaking, that we do have a fundraising plan for over the course of the next year, and we're trying to, increase our reach of new donors, and we're trying to increase our awareness by at least 25% over what it was last year. And we're trying to, we need to fill a gap, which is going to require that we find 20% more funds from different segments over the course of the next year. So everybody should know that, and everybody should feel that they basically should be asking themselves the question, up and down the line, what can I do to assure that our nonprofit organizations' operating needs are being met so that we can fully deliver the mission, and that we have and we will have a sustainable enterprise year to year right here. So everybody needs to be on board. Everybody needs to be bought into that. That's what that slide is trying to emphasize. The fundraising plan, it's the path forward. It's the path forward to a specific place that you want to go. It's like, hey, we need a map. We need to spend time getting out and understanding the map. Well, yeah, that's fine. You can have a map, but if the map doesn't have any cities on it, and you're not sure, where the compass is pointing, you could take the 500-mile trip to Bangor, Maine, or you might end up, in Ottawa, Canada. So you need to know precisely where you want to go. So it is the precise path forward. That's what the fundraising plan is. Specifically, it's where do we need to go this year, and how do we get there each and every month? And the case for support is the fundamental thing in your fundraising plan, as well as all of your fundraising actions. And once again, you can see that the case for support is that one piece of paper or PDF or the one screen that's a web page. But in a nutshell, this is what it is. It's articulating in very clear terms why the nonprofit organization that you're executive director of, or founder of, or development director of, board president of, why it's essential. And then also follow that up with demonstrating that there are positive measured outcomes that have been produced by the mission activities for the mission recipients. And that these positive impacts, it's not just one, it's on a scale, it's on some kind of a scale. There have been multiple positive impacts. And then last but not least, why should a donor or a grantor give to support this particular nonprofit organization right now? That is what has to be in the case for support. And once again, it is the launching, that is the document, if you will, where pretty much everything else launches from. The fundraising plan, also known as the development plan, as well as all the communications that you're doing, from brochures to web pages to standing up in front of a Rotary and speaking for 10 minutes that they allot to you. Let me tell you about our nonprofit. All that comes from the case for support. So it's an important document. Fundraising, particularly today, is multi-channel. Beating a dead horse in some ways, it all flows from the case for support. But it's multi-channel. It involves branding. It involves in-person conversations and digital sharing through e-newsletters, emails, text messages, direct mail, the standard snail mail where an executive director sends you a two-pager, and one of them is a printout of the last class that just graduated in such and such. That would not have happened unless the nonprofit was involved in getting that to happen. A website that has various different landing pages, not just one landing page usually, but depending on where people click on the website, gets them to a different landing page. Social media. So all these things today are the things you have to do in order to make the contacts, to be showing up out there in your community or in that space. And you need to have a plan to put all that together. And you need to have people who are working shoulder to shoulder with you, who have the responsibility for some of these things getting done, some of these actions to take place within a timely fashion that has been posted to the calendar. And that's the way that you can be engaged in activities that are going to get people closer to you and people feeling that they wish to financially partner with your nonprofit so that the mission does fulfill on a year in and year out basis. In fundraising, all these activities that you're involved in, and pretty much every time that you have an encounter, and this should be part of the fundraising plan, if you will, is to make sure that you're thanking people. You thank them for coming out, even if they're, not coming out as a donor. They're coming out because someone else invited them to hear about some of the good things that you're doing and some of the challenges that you're going to face in the next 1 to 2 years. And that's it. They're just coming out to be educated. They're just part of awareness. Make sure that they're thanked. Particularly, obviously, if anyone does come forward and donates as a one-time donor or as a monthly donor, they need the most personal thank you that you can possibly deliver. That's the way people feel closer to your organization. They feel a higher level of trust and confidence in the people who staff the nonprofit. And they need to be thanked for stepping forward. Another thing I wanted to mention to you in fundraising is that people really don't give to causes much. More likely than not, people give to people. They give to people that they know, like, and trust. That's why they give. They also do, however, want to know that the change and the impact of the dollars that they decided to commit to the nonprofit organization. So in fundraising, it's thank you. It's the people connection where people need to know, like, and trust you in order to make particularly larger gifts. And donors really want to know at all levels the change and the impact when they decide to come forward as a donor. Tell me specifically, what is the change and the impact been? That needs to be in the fundraising plan as well. In terms of personal ask, this is once again in that segment area. And that segment on personal ask are what are known as major gifts. Major gifts, some organizations will consider a major gift to be anything over $1,000. A lot of organizations are probably going to think it's more like $5,000 or $10,000 as a major gift when you're talking about an individual. So one part of your financial, not financial, one part of your fundraising plan should be major gifts. These meetings that you will have related to major gifts are extending a personal invitation for a person or two partners, husband and wife, if you will, to help be the change that they want to see. So they're coming forward financially to do that, and you're inviting them to do that. The best person for making that ask, when it gets to be in that major gift segment level, is the person who's in the room at the time, who personally knows the donor or donors. People most often give to the people who they know, like, and trust, as just said a couple of minutes ago. So I just wanted to make sure that this is an example of one of those elements of segmentation and how things change in your fundraising plan when it basically comes to the major gifts category. And if you're looking to explore new major gift prospects, you also want to be looking at wealth screening. Wealth screening is a subscription service, and once again, it's something that once you get serious about going in that direction, there are several vendors that are out there who have, once again, big data databases that will actually allow you to query the database and find a lot of information out about people who could very likely be approached and very likely could say yes for a major gift. Fundraising is not, what is it not? Fundraising is not asking for money. Fundraising is never begging for money. And I make that point just because I've heard that in boardrooms in the last 25 years. And that is what it definitely is not. What it is, it's an invitation to join others in changing the world so it's a better place. Hopefully, when they get to meet your nonprofit organization, they're seeing the kind of people that are involved, the kind of work that they're doing, who the mission recipients are, how the mission recipients are changing for the better, or becoming better citizens, or having the opportunity to grow up to be stronger boys and girls, etc. They're seeing something in your organization that they're not seeing in others, and they see that you are changing the world for the better, and you are inviting them, and they understand this, that you are inviting them to join shoulder to shoulder to become, in a significant and a meaningful way, to become an effective and fulfilled person in the community by sharing their financial resources so that you can go about doing your work in a sustainable fashion and possibly even touch more lives along the way. This is just really a reiteration of what we just said. Fundraising is an invitation to make things noticeably better. And I'll just add that in the fundraising plan, every call to action should be this invitation so that donors have the opportunity to participate in partnering in a way that is significant and meaningful to them. What it all comes down to, you're looking up at the 30,000 feet perspective. Nonprofit fundraising is really a management function. It has all of the elements of Management 101 undergrad. It's planning, organizing, staffing and training, implementing, and measuring and controlling, and then going back to monitor those things, usually on a quarter-to-quarter basis, in case there's a need for any adjustments. So that's really what it is. It's really Management 101. So perhaps the simplest statement for funding the mission and the operations is this, related to a fundraising plan. It's plan your work and work your plan. Also, as additional summary here, the fundraising plan involves, number one, the budget. That's one of your starting points. Right after you get your, right after you get all of your other ducks in a row, if you will, you have to immediately look at the budget. The budget you're now going to compare to the funds gap, number two. And then you're also going to look at number three, what your expected sources of funds are from your various segments. And these are expected. You're estimating. Number four, you want to be engaged in your strategic objectives, as well as the tactical actions that are going to help those strategic objectives actually fulfill. Number five, you're going to transfer all of that over to a calendar for project management purposes. Number six, you're going to track all this and you're going to report it out. Your board is going to be looking for these kind of reports to be sent to them so they can see that there's progress that's being made, or to see that we're in some trouble here and we need to make an adjustment. They need to be aware of that. And last, the fundraising plan. At the end of the year, once you have gone through all of your project management, you have to review the plan with a critical eye to see were there some things that we did last year that we thought were going to be powerful and yield fruit, but did not. And if so, are we going to go forward and do the same thing, or are we going to change off of that and try something different? Okay, voila, we are at the penultimate slide here. This is the continuing education and resources slide. It's not a complete list, of course, but there's plenty here. And by the way, there are consultants that have expertise in things like mission funding and fundraising plans, basically helping you put them together. And you may find donors or grantors who will help you fund this kind of fundraising planning, if that's where, if you decide to bring in someone from the outside to do an evaluation, do an audit, and then help you shoulder to shoulder, basically come up with the an annual fundraising plan. And that concludes.
Just again, everybody will get a copy of this presentation as well as a copy of the recording. And we will be taking questions in just a moment, but just to reiterate, SCORE does have some of our mentors that do kind of specialize in nonprofit organizations. So if you're interested in finding a mentor, please reach out to SCORE through our website or the phone number. And when you do that, you specifically request nonprofit, some nonprofit mentors, and they can help. And so we have a number of ways you can get in touch with SCORE. I just wanted to, before we take the questions, thank Jack very much for providing a great overview of nonprofit planning and fundraising. I hope you all found it very informative and very helpful. We're going to go ahead and take a number of questions. There have been a number of questions that have come up,
Mhm.
And if you have any further questions, please put them into the Q&A, and we'll go ahead and print them or raise them. So the first question is from Karen, and she asks, fundraising, donations, grants versus revenue generated from services. Can we charge recipients of our services for those services? And do we need to solicit donations on top of that?
Well, if I understand the question correctly, it sounds to me like there are some donations that have come in, but they're looking at possibly charging for some kind of a fee for some of the services. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay.
And Karen, I've allowed you to speak if you wanted to clarify your question. You can take yourself off mute and clarify your question if you need to.
Well, the short answer, Karen, the short answer is yes. You can charge for services. You can still fundraise above and beyond that, because there might be other programs that there could be spillover. You also have overhead that very likely would not be covered fully by any kind of fee that you charge. I would just say that a lot of nonprofit organizations that I know of have not charged fees because because of many times the populations that they're serving, there really is not any discretionary income for them to be able to basically say yes, let me go take advantage of that. So there are not fees charged in that instance. But I know of others where it's a nonprofit organization and they raise money and they have, for example, like a dance company. Dance company has high rents. The rental income goes up. They're also in charge of when they turn the lights on and the air conditioning. And they're charging fees for the dancers, but they also still have to fundraise to pay for all the other stuff, So, and the other thing could be, they want to move into their own facility in 5 years. That's part of their plan. They might be fundraising to try to, get away from renting from the school auditorium to actually have their own place where they can do some mild renovations and make it theirs forever, and not have to deal with annual rental expense. So,
I know of many nonprofits that do charge a fee, but sometimes their clients can't afford it. And so they do the fundraising to help supplement the costs of those that can't afford their services. They don't want to not provide the services, but they need to fundraise to cover that shortfall.
that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good, yes, that too. Mhm.
So we have another question from Tammy.
Mhm.
And she says, if you're a brand new nonprofit, how do you provide the measured and positive outcomes on the case for support if you don't yet have started, right? So you haven't
Right,
made that impact just yet.
right. Well, I would suggest, besides a mission statement, there's also a vision statement. And a vision statement is something like, our vision is that we will have, and use like future tense verbs, we will have seen uh, an increase in good nutritional practice, as well as healthy eating lifestyle. I'm just using this as an example. Among poverty level youth, we will have seen knowledge, improved knowledge in going about healthy lifestyle and good nutrition. We will have seen 300 people between the ages of 8 and 14 between 2023 and 2027 in the next 4 years. So what that does is it basically says that even though we don't have anything, we can't post those numbers right now. This program that we've put together is positioned so that when we look back from 4 years out, when it's 2027, and we look back to 2023, we will have seen that we have generated, because of the program that we put together and the contacts that we made with these young people, that we now have 350 healthy young people who understand the importance of nutrition and wellness, that if nothing was done, then the number would be very close to zero. So am I spinning that a little bit? Yeah, but I think in terms of a brand new nonprofit, I think you really have to kind of lead with the vision statement, and really emphasize the vision statement.
Thank you. Thank
Mhm.
you. Another question from Ben is, what is the best way to take large donations? Should they hire a lawyer, draw up legal documents when taking like a sponsorship payment?
No, I would say you do not need a legal document. I just think it just needs to be documented. Someone who is coming forward as a sponsor, there are certain promises. It's almost like a memorandum of understanding, an MOA, and you can do it that way. If you have a lawyer who's on your board, you can ask the lawyer if he would pro bono, draw up a template like that. And you could use that, and that would be a legally reviewed document. But I personally have been involved in a decent number of sponsorship situations with businesses and corporations, and it really was just something that was on letterhead that made a series of promises, if you will, in exchange for your such and such level of sponsorship, which is at a range of X number of tens of thousands of dollars to whatever. You are, these are the benefits that you will accrue. And it's bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. And it's signed by the president of the board and the executive director. It's considered to be a legally binding document, but it's not drawn up by attorneys.
Well, that's good. It saves the nonprofit money then
Oh, yeah,
to pay legal fees.
right.
But
Right.
any other questions, please post them in the Q&A. And while you're thinking about that, I am going to launch another poll just to give us some feedback on this session. I would appreciate the feedback. So there's a poll on your screen if you could maybe just answer some of those questions. In the meantime, Jack, there was another question that came out. What type of project management software is used? You were talking about how, all these actions that have to be done, you're like a project manager. Is there a particular project management software that you've seen be very useful?
The answer is it's rare. It's rare that people actually go out and invest in project management software. The ones that I've seen used in the past have been those by Microsoft, which actually come, I believe, with the Microsoft Office suite. And there is a project management option that's in there. It may increase your subscription fee by $40 a year or something like that, but that is the one that I've seen used by nonprofits. There are some private vendors that are out there. I just don't have any, that are commonly used.
I also know that some of the more extensive CRM tools actually are starting to they do have some components of project management. You can set up schedules for things in the CRM tools. and some things that get scheduled to send out communications or reports and things like that. But the CRM tools that have that probably are a bit more costly.
Right. Yeah. Once again, I don't have anything in particular. I think if we were to Google that, we might actually find even some Excel overlays
Mm,
that are basically they're built on Excel, and they are project management tools. But I have to defer to maybe some other subject matter expert at SCORE. That's maybe what I should do.
yeah.
Tomorrow, I'll see if I can find somebody out there who has come upon a strongly recommended, very cost efficient, cost effective project management tool.
Okay.
Mhm.
Any other questions from folks? And I appreciate the feedback on the webinar poll. I'm not seeing any, Jack. So
Okay.
again, their question just came up. Are there any audit templates that or checklists that you've seen or have used or have seen organizations use to help to ensure the compliance with any, I assume with any kind of restricted donations, or that you actually are using the money as you say you are intending?
Right. Usually for things like that, I usually go to PANO, Pennsylvania
You know?
Association of Nonprofit Organizations, and I pose a question to them. I don't know of any, that are out there on the shelf kind of thing.
Mm,
Another resource on that might be a resource librarian at the Regional Foundation Center. Uh, they may be a resource on that, but I know PANO would be, but I do not know of any particular audit
okay. All
template.
right.
Yeah.
Anything else from folks? Any other questions for Jack? All right. Well, Jack, thank you so much for giving us your time, giving us your
Sure.
knowledge, and
Mhm.
sharing all of that expertise with our attendees. And I hope everybody has a good evening and stays healthy and well.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much, Mercedes. I thank you very much for moderating.
Sure. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Mhm. Good night.
Good night.